and send those to the grand jury, or ask to be allowed in to present them to the grand jury against these individuals. The problem is that most county and district attorneys will attempt to interfere with our access to the grand jury because they don't want us that know what's going on and how to present it in there getting them indicted. I mean, how good does that look to find out that the person who's responsible for upholding the law in the county is actually one of the worst violators of law in the county? And that would be true of almost any of the county and district attorneys that I've encountered. They all have skeletons in the closet. Some of them look like mass burial sites, in fact, simply because they will violate more laws to get a conviction than the person they convicted ever broke before they got sentenced.
So the key, it really is having informed people, informed citizen on the grand juries.
That's true. The more they know about what the law is, what the individual rights of all of us are, the better they're able to see that what they're being presented is being cast in an unfavorable light outside of those rights in the law, which is what most every county and district attorney or prosecutor of any kind counts on, is that the jury does not understand the law, the jury does not understand the rights of the accused, or their own for that matter.
Sure, sure. Well, let me ask you this, and there's a lot of lakes and streams and rivers, you know, surrounding Austin, Texas, and I've seen this for myself. The police have actually been coming in, and if your dog is not on a leash and he's in the water, or I've seen people get ticketed for smoking cigarettes, right? And I don't know if they were caught maybe throwing a butt in the sand or what have you, but they're ticketing them from smoking cigarettes for not having dogs on a leash, and of course they want to know if you have any open containers and that sort of thing. What are their rights when it comes to that?
Well, again, what's going on here is they're attempting to regulate every activity we engage in. In this case, they're almost always acting under city ordinances. Now, what very few people will admit to that are in the powers that be, and those of us in the general public that haven't educated ourselves on the subject, tend to think that an ordinance is the same thing as a law, and that's absolutely not true. For instance, here in Texas, it's very easy to prove that fact simply by looking at the state constitution. You have Article 3, Section 29 through 35 of the Texas Constitution, which tells us very clearly that any law has to have a particular statement, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Texas. Before that bill can have the force and effect of law, it has to be discussed over several days on the floor of each house, and so on and so on and so on. And eventually, that bill, if it's passed, becomes an enrolled bill and sent to the governor for the purpose of getting his signature. Then and only then does it become law. That power to create law was given specifically and entirely to the state legislature. It is a non-delegable power. They cannot delegate lawmaking power to the counties or to the municipalities.
All right, but okay, so if I'm sitting in my inner tube and I've got an ice chest full of beer, and I'm drinking one or two, and the police officer, he's on the shore and he's like, you know, get over here, you know, how much you had to drink today?
Well, the question there is, what can they really do and what do they actually do? As long as you don't know your rights, they can do whatever they want.
Exactly.
When you do know your rights, they're still going to do whatever they want until you make them accountable for what they did. And that's where we have our largest failing, is knowing how to make them accountable for what they do. When an officer enforces a law that clearly violates a right, then that is not a law. In fact, it's void on its face according to Article 1, Section 29 of the Texas Constitution.
Is it illegal to drink beer floating down the river?
Not that I'm aware of. Who does it hurt? Again, as Thomas Jefferson said, our legislatures are not apprised of their own level of authority. Their authority is and has always been limited to, and I'm kind of improvising here, this is not a direct quote, but it's along the same line, that their authority is specifically limited only to the creation of laws that prevent the harming of individuals and their rights. Everything else is outside of their authority.
That's right. Yeah.
So any law they create, by definition, at the legislative level, has two areas. There is general law, which is law applicable to the general public, and there is private law. The private law are those rules and regulations associated with governmental function. They are internal to the administrative agencies of the state and any political subdivision of the state. An ordinance, by definition, is not law. In fact, most people are not aware that Texas law specifically defines a municipality as any incorporated city, town, or village. Well, incorporated means corporation. They are a corporate entity. And a corporate entity can have its own internal rules and regulations. But if you work for McDonald's as an employee, do those rules and regulations apply to you? Yes. But do they apply to you as McDonald's customer? No, they do not. So you don't have to care at what temperature the fries have to be cooked and for how long. You don't have to care what the cleaning crew is required to do at the end of a shift as the customer. You only have to care as the employee or the person contracted with that corporation. So an ordinance is no different. It's an internal rule that governs the employees and the contractors to that corporation. That's all it's ever been.
Sure.
So an ordinance regulates those employed by the city. It doesn't regulate the people of the city. They're completely different things.
Okay, my girlfriend's employed by the state school in Abilene, Texas. She drove to work yesterday, in fact. Huge, long line in front of her workplace. They were checking for valid driver's license, and there was police there at the gates. And they were handed a brochure, or a notice, I should say, that said that it is a state law that everybody has a valid driver's license and insurance, and they were checking every employee's records before they were allowed to enter the state school property. I mean, and she was naturally very upset, but she's afraid to kind of make a big deal out of it because, after all, it is her employer.
And that's what they count on. They count on putting you in a position where you have little choice but to agree with their acts. Mm-hmm. That's what they count on most people to acquiesce under, is the fact that they can't afford to lose their job. They can't afford to make waves because they're in trouble for something else, and they think it'll go badly for them when they fight one and let the other have a deal cut or whatever. They're always looking for ways to put the screws to us and force us down the path they want us to go. She was absolutely within her rights to say, unless you can give me articulable probable cause as to why I should produce anything for you, let me through. I have to get to work. Mm-hmm. She's perfectly within her rights to do that. But, as we all know, the odds of them overreacting to that are extremely high. But when people look at me and say, well, all you're going to do is wind up getting yourself arrested, for me, that's not such a big deal. I actually kind of look forward to it, because when I go to jail on something this stupid by these people, I'm basically sitting there going, 1 hour, $1,000, 2 hours, another $1,000. Because when this is all done, there's going to be a lawsuit at the end of this. And there is case precedent that will let me win that lawsuit. Because what they're doing is they're putting you inside of a regulable activity that you're not engaging in. The statement that these people are making, that state law requires everyone to have a driver's license. Well, that statement says every blind man has to have one. That statement says everybody with vertigo has to have one. People that can't get a license because of a medical condition, a physical condition, an age thing. How are you going to enforce the broad statement, everybody has to have one? That's idiotic. And believe me, that's where most of these people excel, is at idiotic. Because they will make unqualified statements they cannot in any way support with any real law. And once you realize that what's being said and what law backs it up don't agree, then you become empowered. By becoming empowered, you now have a route you can take, because you know, well, this was a lie. What if this is a lie? Oh, wait, there's the law. That's a lie, too. And you keep on down the road, and they start compounding lie after lie after lie, and you manage to know how to gather that information, gather that evidence, and get it into a court of law and properly apply it, then you can actually make them pay for what they're doing. And that's what we need to start doing.
Oh, absolutely. And tell us about your radio show, Rule of Law Radio. How long have you been doing it? And I understand you take calls and you educate people just like we're doing now.
Yes, in fact, I am the newest of the three co-hosts on the show. There's me, Randy Kelton, and Deborah Stevens. I actually became a member of